Today in Tarkir Dragonstorm, we get an elephant saga, a goblin 1-drop, a super slow turtle, and so much more. Let's break it down. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron and it's time for another daily dose of Tarkir Dragonstorm spoilers. So we are nearly at the end of spoiler season. We get the full set tomorrow. My understanding is we already have every mythic. After we look at today's cards, we will have almost every rare. There might be one or two rares that we haven't seen yet. So this honestly might be our final spoiler video. We have to wait and see if there's enough cards tomorrow that are interesting. I'll do a video to talk about them, but we're getting super close to the end. The good news is, really, we're just kind of starting Tarkir Dragonstorm. We're going to have so much stuff coming up in the next few weeks, podcasts and gameplay and streams, so keep an eye out for all that. But today, we've got some super cool cards to talk about, which means we should probably jump right into it, start talking some Tarkir Dragonstorm cards. Before we do, a couple of quick reminders. First, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Second, keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout the day. You should head on over to MTGPreviews.com. Anyway, let's talk Tarkir Dragonstorm. First up today, we get a new Temur Elephant saga in Roar of Endless Song. So Roar of Endless Song, a 5-mana Temur saga. First two lore counters, you create 5/5 green elephant creature tokens. The third lore counter and the last lore counter doubles the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. So if you actually do the math on this card, first lore counter, you get a 5/5. Second one, you get a 5/5, so that's 10 power. Then the last lore counter doubles the power. That's 20 power in theory on an empty board over the course of a few turns, all by itself. This card could actually just kill your opponent. Plus, remember, the last lore counter doubles the power of all creatures that you control and the toughness of all creatures you control for that turn. So if you have additional creatures on the battlefield, you can get through even more damage. So the first thing I thought of when I saw this card, there's really two cards it reminds me of. The first one I thought of is it reminds me a lot of one of Magic's most X-rated mythics, an Armada Worm. Armada Worm, 6 mana, makes 2 5/5s. They do have trample though. So the twist here is Armada Worm costs more mana, but you get both 5/5s right away. Roar of Endless Song, 1 less mana, but you take an extra turn to get the second 5/5. The biggest difference is no trample. If the elephants had trample, this might actually be a pretty good card, because then that chump blocking on the turn that you get the unnatural growth, that suddenly isn't really an option if these worm tokens have trample. So your opponent's not just going to be able to throw a couple 1/1s in front of them and soak up all the damage. The other card this reminds me of, and bear with me because I know it's in 3 colors, it's 2 more mana, but it's kind of like a really big Temur History of Benalia. And we saw History of Benalia be a staple level card in aggro decks back during Dominaria Standard. First 2 lore counters, you make 2 2-night tokens. Last one, you pump your knights +2/+1 until end of turn. So History of Benalia was actually very, very good. Roar of Endless Song kind of does the same thing. It just costs 5 mana, but it helps make up for that by being in green, since you can theoretically ramp into it. If you think about Standard, you could be playing this on turn 3, just like History of Benalia, like turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Overlord of the Haunt Woods, turn 3 Roar of Endless Song. Probably going to win a lot of games. So it's going to be interesting to see how good this card is. Like I said before, if the elephants had trample, which they're elephant, shouldn't they have trample? Then this card would be legitimately strong in Standard. Without trample, I still think it could serve a role. The question is, where do you play this card? So you could just play it in any Temur mid-range deck just for value. It also works really well with token synergies. If you have Elspeth Stormslayer or Doubling Season on the battlefield to double up the tokens that you make. The only problem I see here is they both cost 5 mana. I guess Mondrak is a little bit better because it's 4 mana, but then you need double white mana. So the mana is going to be a challenge here. How many 5-drops can you realistically play in your deck? That's going to be a problem, but still, if you can double the tokens, it gets even better. It also just seems good in Temur in general, because remember, one of the themes of Temur is creatures with power 4 or greater. So this gives you 2 creatures with power 4 or greater to power up your Herd Heirloom, or maybe your Temur Battle Cry, or maybe your Spectral Denial. So it does seem pretty solid in the context of Temur. I think worst case, this card's probably a limited bomb. Like in limited, 2 5/5s for 5, even without trample, is kind of absurd. And then that last lore counter are going to close out a lot of games. As far as Commander, I honestly don't usually play cards like this. There's a couple of places, though, I would consider it. So the first is Loot the Key to Everything. So Loot cares about different permanent types on the battlefield. So the trick of Roar of Endless Song is it's an enchantment that makes creatures. So it's a card that puts 2 permanent types on the battlefield. So it works really well with Loot. The other place is Saga decks. If you're playing like Tom Bombadil, It seems like a solid saga there. Add some bodies to the battlefield, and maybe that last lore counter can be your finisher. So, Roar of Endless Song seems like a limited bomb. I could see it showing up in Standard as sort of a weird Armada Worm or History of New Benalia, especially if you can ramp into it a turn or two early. And then in Commander, I don't think it's like a staple by any means, but there are decks where you could play it. We also got an uncommon that plays on the elephant theme in Mammoth Bellow. So Mammoth Bellow, 5 mana to make a 5/5 green elephant. It's a sorcery, and then you can harmonize it for 8 mana. So I think this is mostly Roar of Endless Song at home, but if you're playing an elephant deck, it's not that bad. The harmonize is actually kind of cute, because remember, you can tap the elephant to reduce the cost by 5, so in theory it's 8 total mana to make 2 5/5s, which again, probably isn't standard good, but worth keeping in mind if you're in Temur and Draft at least. We also got a new red 1-drop in Star of the Arena. So Star of the Arena, 1 mana for a 1/1 Goblin Warrior. It has Mobilize 1, so when it attacks, you get the 1/1 red warrior that's tapped and attacking that you sack on your end step, and then you can pay 2 and sack this creature to deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature. So a 1-drop that technically attacks for 2, thanks to the warrior token, and then can be a removal spell later in the game once you have a big board and you don't really need a 1-drop. And I think that's the big calling card of Star of the Arena. It's a 1-drop that's pretty good on turn 1, but then doesn't lose its value in the late game a lot of the times, because in the late game you probably have 3, 4, 5 creatures, and then this could be sniping a Shieldred or something for 2 mana. So I should say, I don't think this card is going to find a home in the best red decks in Standard. If you look at like the Mice decks, the Prowess style decks, I think this is just worse than Heartfire Hero and Hired Claw and Monastery Swiftspear. It actually reminds me the most of Burnout Bastronaut. So Burnout Bastronaut, it's not a bad card. It's not quite good enough to beat out like the staple red 1-drops in tier red aggro, but if you're playing goblins or you care about starting your engines, this actually becomes the perfect 1-drop for your deck. And I think that's going to be the same with Star of Arena. You're not going to play it in the mono red Prowess decks or the Mice decks, but if you're a red deck that maybe cares about Mobilize, this is probably going to be a chase 1-drop. If you're playing Zergo to keep your tokens around, Narrative to get more damage, maybe you're playing War Leader's Call, which works really well with the Mobilize theme, then Star of the Arena is great. Then War Leader's Call, you're making a 2/2 token that's dealing damage when it comes into play. Maybe your tokens are staying on the battlefield thanks to Zergo. Maybe Narrative's letting them deal even more damage. So in a Mobilize deck, it seems really good. The other place I would consider it would be in Goblins. In Goblins, there's not as much competition in the 1-drop slot. Burnout Bastronaut, I found to be pretty decent. Grease Wrench Goblin, I actually really like. And then you're down to like Fanatical Firebrand. I think in Goblins, this might just be better than Burnout Bastronaut, because Goblins are really good with flooding the board. You get all these Goblin token producers. So the removal mode on Star of Arena, it seems pretty realistic that turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, you could draw this off the top, play it, and immediately sack it for 2 mana, and just kill your opponent's best thing and get in a huge attack with your other Goblins. Plus, it's fine on turn 1, right? It comes down early, it starts getting in damage, so it seems good there as well. There could even be an argument for playing it in Goblins, especially like Wax Goblins, back in other formats, just for the removal mode. A body that enters the battlefield that you can use to like Surge or Reckless Bushwhacker, and then also as a goblin and is also a removal spell, seems like it's in the conversation at least. I really like the removal aspect of this card. So again, I'm not saying it's better than Skirk Prospect or Legion Loyalist, but I think it's interesting enough as a goblin that's a removal spell to at least try out in something like 8-Whack back in Pioneer, back in Modern. So Star of the Arena, pretty interesting card. It seems like the perfect 1-drop for Mobilize, and the removal mode could keep it relevant in the late game. We also got one of the wackiest cards from the set, an Ambling Stormshell. So Ambling Stormshell, a 5 mana 5/9 turtle with Ward 2. It says when it attacks, put 3 stun counters on it and draw 3 cards. And then when you cast a turtle spell, you get to untap it. So Ambling Stormshell calls back to one of the most infamous creatures from our first visit to Tarkir, in Meandering Tower Shell. Meandering Tower Shell, also a 5 mana 5/9 in an island walk. When it attacks, you gotta exile it and you return it to the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking the beginning of your next declare attack step. So a very slow turtle that once it attacks, it actually deals damage the next turn. Ambling Stormshell is kind of the same, right? You get in this attack, you draw 3 cards with it, but then if you play it fairly, it's gonna be tapped down for a few turns, which is gonna make it hard to to draw more cards with it in the near future. So is Ambling Stormshell a good card? And I think the answer is almost certainly not. If you think about what 5 mana buys you in Standard, and many of these powerful cards that we're looking at right now don't even see play in current Standard all that much, you could be getting Aclazats, or Loots, or the Speed Demon, or Twin Flame Tyrant, or Railway Brawler. This is a creature that doesn't do anything right away, and it needs to attack to do something. And then even if you attack, it's not going to attack again for 3 more turns, at least played fairly. And you need a bunch of turtles if you want to make it good. So when you add all those hoops to it, I'd be surprised if this was seeing Standard play. But if it is seeing Standard play, where would we play this card? So first, we actually do have some other decent turtles in Standard. Blossoming Tortoise Ramps, Fecund Greenshell always surprises me with how strong it is when we play it. And then if you want to go really deep, Pride of the Hullclad works well with the high toughness of Stormshell. Bedrock Tortoise lets it attack for 9 rather than 5 by dealing damage equal to its toughness. So maybe we can build against the odds turtles in Standard with Ambling Stormshell. We also should say, we think, at least from the bit of spoilers we've seen so far, that stun counters might be one of the big mechanics for Spider-Man, since it kind of makes sense with the flavor of Spider-Man. So maybe the stun counter thing will be a lot better once we get the Spider-Man set this fall. So keep that in mind. This could be kind of a plant for the future. If you're just all about removing stun counters from things, then this card becomes much more exciting, because maybe putting 3 storm counters on it is actually going to be an upside. The other trick for this card is giving it vigilance. So if you can give this vigilance, it's still probably not a great card, right? It's still a 5-drop that needs to attack to do anything, even though the ward does help. But if it has vigilance, you can add as many stun counters to it as you want, and you're still going to be able to keep attacking with it. So if you have an Inga and a Sika, or a Lasarian Armory, you can just swing with this every turn in a 5 mana 5/9 with ward 2 that just draws 3 cards every time it attacks. That actually seems like kind of a decent card. In Commander, I think mostly the same thing is true. If you're playing some sort of deck with a commander that gives your team vigilance, like Inquisitor Greyfax or Inga Nazika, Tuskia Digsite Mentor, this could be a fun addition in one of your card drop slots. It really fits the theme pretty well of vigilance with your commander. So is it better than playing Heuristic Study or something? No, probably not, but it is way more flavorful. The other place it's kind of cute is in blink decks. If you're doing Braga or Aminatu or Yaryat or Room or Ligrella, you can attack with this and then just blink it to untap it and get rid of the stun counters on it. Of course, turtle decks too, which are super fringe, but still, if you're playing like Pride of the Hullclad, you're probably playing Ambling Stormshell. So Ambling Stormshell, I love that they managed to make a callback to Meandering Tower Shell, one of the most infamous memes from our first trip to Tarkir. The card itself, I mean, it's a callback to an infamous meme card, so probably not going to be competitive. But hey, if turtles are a deck in Standard, I'm going to be thrilled. We also got a new Sultai rare in Lotuslight Dancers. So Lotuslight Dancers, a 5 mana Sultai 3/6 zombie bard with lifelink. It says when it enters, search your library for a black card, a green card, and a blue card. Put those cards in your graveyard and then shuffle. So Lotuslight Dancers, depending on how you look at this card, it's kind of triple Entomb, but you gotta get cards of a specific color. It's kind of a Buried Alive on a stick, except you can get non-creatures, assuming they're the right color. It also compares to like Gravemaker Lamia, Violent Tumor, these creatures that enter and tutor something into your graveyard. Lotuslight Dancers, yeah, there is a color restriction, but being able to get 3 cards instead of 1, and having this 3/6 lifelinking body, actually might make this card playable. So what do you do with this card? The easy answer is set up some sort of reanimation kill where you're like Lotuslight Dancers for Atraxa and then you zombify the Atraxa to get into play and use it to win the game. It's also cute with creatures that can return themselves from the graveyard to play. So in Standard we have like Bloodghast, Afterburner Expert, Ukenbach the Great Mistake. We could use Lotuslight Dancers to get them in the graveyard, then make a land drop, get back our Bloodghast, or exhaust something to get back the Afterburner Expert. So that's another direction you could go with, some sort of like grindy graveyard deck. And then remember, we have graveyard synergy pieces too. If you're playing a deck that has cards like Insidious Roots, being able to tutor up something like Bloodghast is even better, because when it leaves the graveyard, then it's going to be triggering your Insidious Roots to make a plan, do all these other shenanigans. So in the right deck, the synergy this card can generate can be pretty strong. Also worth pointing out, as I mentioned before, it's not restricted to just creatures, so you can get non-creature spells with this as well, which in Standard could be relevant with Harmonize, these spells that we can cast cast from our graveyard. So you can Lotuslight Dancers to get a Nature's Rhythm, and then tap it to reduce the cost and tutor out something else, or a Winter Night Stories to draw even more cards. We even actually have Madroltha in Standard. We haven't seen Madroltha be good since it came back in Foundations. It's more of a commander card, but I could imagine like using Lotuslight Dancers to tutor up the 3 perfect things to cast with my Madroltha from the graveyard the next turn. Once you get back to older formats, then you get even more powerful synergies. You can use Lotuslight Dancers to tutor up cards like Unburial Rites or Dread Return. These are reanimation spells that you can cast from your graveyard, as well as what you want to reanimate. So you tutor up your Atraxa and your Unburial Rites or your Dread Return, and just immediately reanimate it and use it to win the game. So that seems pretty powerful. I think the big question for this card is, can it be an Emergent Ultimatum? If you remember Emergent Ultimatum, when this card was in Standard with Ikoria, it took like a year or something, but eventually players figured out the perfect Emergent Ultimatum pile, where if you cast an Emergent Ultimatum, you get these 3 specific cards, and you're essentially guaranteed to win the game. Can we do something like that with Lotuslight Dancers? Is there a perfect pile where if you get these 3 specific cards in your graveyard, you're very likely to win the game or pull super far ahead? So I haven't found that pile yet. We'll talk about some combos that people have suggested that so far look pretty unrealistic to me, but it's worth keeping an eye on because it feels like this could be a breakable card. I'm not sure what format, I'm not sure what the synergy is, but it's worth keeping in mind whenever you can triple tutor with the same card, there could be something busted you could do with that. So in Commander, I think any sort of like Sultai Graveyard deck or Yarok, a Panharmonicon style deck, is going to like this card. If you're playing Madroltha or any of the Tevils or any Mimeoplasm, this just seems like a great value card. Even better, I guess, in Mimeoplasms, because you can tutor up whatever creatures you need to build the best Mimeoplasm possible. So it seems like the perfect Mimeoplasm card. As far as combos, there's a couple that the person who spoiled this card suggested, and they do work, but none of them really jump off the page at me as being combos that I would actually put in my commander deck. So for example, you got Lotuslight Dancer, you have a Shallow Grave, a reanimation spell that gives haste in hand. You can cast Lotuslight Dancer to put Necrotic Ooze, Naxxraw Click, Cross, and Restore into your graveyard. Then you can Shallow Grave to reanimate the Necrotic Ooze. It's going to have haste because of Shallow Grave. Then you're able to tap it thanks to Cross and Restore's ability to untap 3 lands if you have Threshold. You also need Threshold to make this work. So you untap 3 lands, then you can use those 3 lands to pay for Naxxraw Click's ability to untap the Necrotic Ooze, to exile the top card of your opponent's library, and then you just do that a million times and exile everyone's decks and win by milling your opponent out. So it takes 7 mana, and it takes having another specific card in hand, and it requires playing stuff like Naxxraw Click in your deck that isn't going to do much outside of the combo, but it does win the game. Or another example, you have Lotus Dancers in hand alongside Demonic Consultation. You can like Lotus Dancers for Dread Return, Acorn Harvest, Thassa's Oracle. You can pay some mana to flashback the Acorn Harvest to make a couple of squirrels. Then you can sacrifice Lotus Dancers and the squirrels to the Dread Return to get back the Thassa's Oracle with the trigger on this deck. You cast the Demonic Consultation from hand, exile your entire deck, win the game. Altogether, this is what, like 8 mana in 3 life, I think, and you need both Demonic Consultation and Lotus Dancers in hand. But again, if you meet all that criteria, it can win the game. The upside of this combo is it does require less bad cards, like Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle, already the best thing going in CEDH. Dread Return, pretty infamous combo piece banned in Modern, so you're not going to overload on Naxxraw Clicks and so forth. But those are some examples of the kind of combos that you can build with this. So let me know what you think about this card. Lotuslight Dancers, it's a card that I hope is good, because I think it's a super cool design. I do wonder, though, because we've seen similar-ish cards in the past that have been kind of like medium to unplayed, like the Gravebreaker Lamia or whatever. So let me know what you think about this one. I think in any Sultai Graveyard Commander deck, super interested in playing this card. In Standard, I'm excited to build around it, although I haven't really found the perfect synergy outside of just like, I'm going to reanimate my Atraxa to really make it busted. But it's a super cool design. It seems powerful, even breakable, perhaps, with the right card. So if you have some ideas of how we can break Lotus Dancers, let me know in the comments, because this card could be pretty good. In the world of lower rarity cards, we got one we're shouting out today in Shocking Sharpshooter. So a 2-mana 1/3 with reach, it's a human archer. It says whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. So Shocking Sharpshooter, it's essentially an impact tremors on a body. I guess the twist is in Commander, it hits target opponent instead of each opponent, but still, a 2-drop that deals damage whenever a creature enters seems like it could be pretty strong. Isn't something like the Boros Convoke style decks, they're really good at just flooding the board with creatures. It's going to add up to a lot of damage, although honestly, Is it better than More Leader's Call that also buffs your creatures and is only 1 more mana? In Commander, I think you can play it in essentially any deck that would be playing Impact Tremors, so like Purphoros, Arabella, Renin Seri. If your deck wants Impact Tremors, you probably want this as a backup Impact Tremors as well. So Shocking Sharpshooter, not busted or anything, but it's an uncommon that could certainly play a role in the right competitive deck. Of course, there's also some draft chaff that you can check out over at MTGPreviews.com. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily Tarkir Dragonstorm spoilers, not just for today, but possibly for all of spoiler season. So tomorrow, we get the full set spoiler. My current understanding is we have already gotten every single mythic from the set. We've already gotten maybe every rare. I think there might be 1 or 2 that we haven't seen as of when I'm making this video. A few lore rarity cards. So if there's enough stuff for a video tomorrow, I'll make a spoiler video talking about the rest of the set. If not, it doesn't mean that we're done with Tarkir Dragonstorm. Actually, we're just starting Tarkir Dragonstorm. Over the next few weeks, we're going to have podcasts about this set, tons of gameplay. There should be an early access day over on Twitch next week, so keep an eye out for all that. But now that we're almost at the end of spoilers, what do you think of this set? And I gotta say, shout out to Wizards, this set is exactly what I wanted. And one of the things I've realized, actually thanks to this set, is Wizards has made it pretty clear recently that not every set is going to be for you. Wizards is making a game that is absolutely huge. They're making sets that try to appeal to Funko Pop loot lovers. They're making sets that try to appeal to Marvel fans and Spider-Man fans and Doctor Who fans. They're trying to reach an incredibly huge audience, which means I'm not gonna love every set the same way I love my favorite sets. I'm still gonna appreciate every set because I just love Magic, and I'm excited for new Magic cards, even if I don't really care that much about the flavor of the set itself. But what I realized is when a set like this comes along, that is almost specifically for me. This is exactly what I want out of my Magic sets. I'm going to do my best to appreciate it because the next set, it might not be nearly as much for me, but this one is for me and I'm incredibly excited. But let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching this spoiler season, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll be back, I guess, in a few weeks with some Final Fantasy spoilers. So until then, be good, everyone. Have an amazing day, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for even more Magic? We can find yesterday's spoiler video here, or maybe the budget Magic, where we played a 0 rare $30 build of Caves in Standard.